I'm so excited you're with us today at Just Like Nana. Today might need more than tea. I don't know, hot cocoa with little mini marshmallows. It's just such an exciting day. We have Dr. Peter Levine here. Y'all, he's been studying trauma, how to release trauma since the 1960s. He's incredible. He's a gentle soul and a lovely human being, and could not be more thrilled than to be talking with him today. Dr. Levine is the developer of somatic experiencing, which is a naturalistic and neurobiological approach to healing trauma. He holds doctorates in both biophysics and psychology. He's the founder and advisor to the Somatic Experiencing Institute. He's the founder and president of the Ergos Institute of Somatic Education. He's the author of many, many best-selling books on trauma, including Waking the Tiger, which has been published in over 29 languages. His most recent book is Trauma and Memory, Brain and Body in Search of a Living Past, a practical guide for understanding and working with traumatic memory. He's also written an autobiography. He has served as a stress consultant for NASA in the early space shuttle development. One of his recent Lifetime Achievement Awards, that's what you want to say, right? Is, well, there's too many Lifetime Achievement Awards to name, but I'll tell you a recent one, is from Psychotherapy Networker. He leads trauma healing courses for the public worldwide. He teaches specialized master class courses to somatic experiencing students. He's a senior fellow and consultant at the Meadows Addiction and Trauma Treatment Center. And his somatic experiencing trainings span so many countries. I think he tells me in the interview 55 countries on 6 continents, and it's just still growing. And we get to hear what he has to say today. Just a trigger warning for those who need it, that there is discussion of an assault that is sexual. So if that's too much for you, take care of yourself and don't listen. Also, just want to reiterate, because Dr. Levine makes it really clear how helpful and often necessary it is for someone to have a professional guiding them through the release of trauma, that if delved into too quickly or without support and guidance, there can actually be re-traumatization. So again, just a shout out for everyone to take care of themselves, to do what they need. Again, I am not a mental health professional. I'm not qualified to offer guidance or healing trauma on my own. I'm simply a person who has worked for not as long as Dr. Levine, and certainly not in the same manner, but for decades really, on healing myself and some, not all, of my own familial trauma, and just love talking about it and providing resources and different perspectives, because there's never going to be a one size fits all, do A, B, C, and all is well. We are all, of course, unique individuals with different needs, different sort of paths that resonate with us, and we need to follow those. And so Just Like Nana is simply an offering of information. Hey, have you looked at it from this perspective? Have you thought about this? Do you want to explore this further? And that's another thing to mention. I mean, this interview with Dr. Levine is roughly 30 minutes or so. He's worked for somewhere around 60 years on trauma and resolving trauma. So of course, this half hour can't even begin to cover or summarize all that he's done. So all of these discussions with all of these experts and mental health professionals are really intended just to kind of provide a little glimmer, plant a seed, if you will, of an idea that might be interesting to you, might be effective for you, and great, explore that. And if it doesn't seem like the right fit, that's great too. Thanks for listening. Dr. Levine, I am just humbled and honored to have you here today, and just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart personally for all you've done to help me on my healing journey. So thank you.
Mhm. Well, great. That's good to hear. Thank you.
Absolutely. I would love to start if you're willing to share if you have a favorite or powerful memory of one of your grandmas and what you called her.
Yeah. Grandma Bertha. And I think I called her Grandma.
Okay.
And she was my mother's mother, my maternal grandmother. Oh my gosh. Thank you for asking the question. I have this wonderful memory because after a while, they bought a farm out in the country. And so we would spend time with them. We would spend the summer there. And sometimes we would just come up for a weekend, for a long weekend during the winter. And we had orchards. And so we would pick the apples and bring them in. And my grandmother would cut them up
Mm-hmm.
and she would make apple pie. But the best part of it was that she would put slices of cheddar cheese on the
Mm.
pie. And on top of the cheddar cheese, there was a scoop of vanilla ice cream.
Oh, wow.
And so that's my memory of Grandma Bertha.
What state was the farm in?
It was in upstate New York, in
Okay.
Monroe, Harriman, New York.
Wonderful. I bet it was just beautiful. Well, thank you for
Oh,
sharing
yeah.
that.
Yeah, sure. Actually, it was a wonderful question. You got me to reflect on that.
Yeah, it's fun to remember our grandmas. So, just like Nana focuses on, they're kind of different names for it, ancestral trauma, intergenerational trauma. And I want to be clear that our focus isn't on blaming anyone else for their own life
Oh,
experiences, doing
yeah,
the best they did with what they had, all of that. It's just
sure.
looking at what are the effects, through families of trauma experienced by others. So I'm curious about what aspects of your work have focused on that familial or ancestral trauma.
Yeah, well, I would say in a way all of it.
Fair enough.
I mean, yeah, because I think originally we have the idea, that we are the way we are because of things that our parents did to us, and which is a fairly limited worldview.
Hmm.
But then it was more clear that these we were also affected by generational past and through even from our distant ancestors. And the first time I got to understand or I realized how important this was, I think I write about this in my autobiography of trauma. I was beginning to see people in the 1970s. A number of my clients reported the smell of burning flesh. And the number of them were vegetarians, actually. Some of them were vegetarians. So I became curious about that, and I asked them to query their parents about their family history. And it turned out that a number of them had parents or grandparents, probably, that were in the Holocaust. It's a little hard even to speak about it, but
Absolutely.
can just imagine where the smell of burning flesh might have come. And then over the years, I've also worked with not as many, but a number of African Americans.
Hmm.
And it was clear, of course, that these effects are lingering in terms of, systemic racism. But there was also this imprint from the times of slavery and the Civil War and slavery, but also in somatic experiencing.
Yeah.
So, like you said, we don't look as victims.
No.
We look more as patterns, as energetic patterns in space time that are affected in all directions, as do our experiences affect those in front of us that come for the next generations from us. So, again, to your question, yes, absolutely. We want to look at the pattern, and it's like a fractal. So the pattern may look like it's coming from things that have happened to us in this lifetime, but also in other lifetimes and in many, many lifetimes past. But again, that's more of a mechanistic view. that
Mm,
we're really looking at, or cause and effect, but we're looking at basic patterns. And the patterns play out in the here and now. And in somatic experiencing, yes, of course, we're working with the traumas and the ancestral traumas, but we're working with them in a sense as they play out in the here and now,
mm,
working and in the here and now in the body.
right.
And that was really kind of the new thing that somatic experiencing brought into the world, that these are things that imprint our bodies, our bodily experience.
I want to talk about that because even when you were describing, unfortunately, some people's experience of, I'm smelling this burning flesh, or it's such a visceral, embodied
Yeah,
experience with senses. What has your research shown you about how that trauma sort of lives in the body? I mean, is it a chemical? Is it energy? Is it an emotion? Is it all of those things?
I can give you an easy response to that. It's all of those things, but particularly it's an energy pattern. One of the ways in the past when I've worked, I occasionally do a workshop on working with our ancestral patterns, is I have the one person who's the focus, and then they have other people in the group represent parents, grandparents, great grandparents, and so forth. And they don't say anything. They're just put in space in front of them and off to the side and so forth. Then what I do is we have a whole, like yarns for weaving,
Yes.
many different colors of yarn. And we have each person hold one end, person who's being the subject, the focus.
Hmm.
They're holding it in one hand, but they're going out to all of these different other ancestral
Right.
representations. And again, the idea is just to feel into it, into the body, because
Hmm.
what you're doing here is you are setting up that energy pattern. So I don't have them speak, but just their energy being there.
Yeah.
And then I'll work with the person who, again, is the focus on their here and now experience as they connect to that energetic dimension.
That is incredible.
It is to see it. It really is
Yeah.
incredible.
I mean, humans, many of us are just so visual. So to have that actual visual and to see the web and the connections and the energy and really feel that in your body.
Yeah, exactly. The web of existence.
We could talk about trauma all day, but what you've done for so many is look at mechanisms for healing. And
Yes.
you've talked about somatics. I mean, I think people have a general understanding of that. It's becoming, I mean, largely in part thanks to your work, becoming more commonplace for people to sort of hear about that, understand it. But can you tell us from your perspective, what do you think of when you think of somatics? How does that help us heal?
Yeah. When I first started developing things, my work in the late 60s and into the early 70s, there was no definition of trauma as PTSD. So it was still another like 14, 15 years in the future. So I had the advantage, I was going to say disadvantage, but I had the advantage of not knowing that trauma was supposed to be a brain disorder, even a brain disease, that the best you could hope for is helping people, well, using certain medications, which can be helpful, of course, and to try to change their thoughts, their negative beliefs. But that really didn't change. It really didn't shift because, again, trauma is something that happens to us. Let's just say we see somebody that's had an accident and our brains recognize injury and signal injury down into our guts. So
Mhm.
we see the injured person, we go, ugh, we clench.
Yeah,
Yes. Now there's a nerve, and I hope this doesn't get too technical, but it's worth talking a little bit about it. It's
please.
called the vagus nerve,
Mhm.
and it goes from the back of the brain, the back of the brainstem, like Vegas is like vagabond, same route, and it just travels all throughout the whole body, especially innervating the organs
Yeah.
below the diaphragm, but also the lungs and the heart as well. And this nerve is great majority of this nerve, which again is the largest nerve,
Mhm.
is sensory. In other words, it's taking information from our guts and taking that information up into our brain. And 80% of those nerve fibers are sensory. They're coming from our guts and our organs. Only 10% is coming from our brain down to our organs. So going back to imagining that situation where you come out and you see somebody is injured and your guts go, ugh. Now that's the brain again recognizing injury, sending the signals down to the guts, and the guts twist. But then the sensory part, which is the majority of that nerve, actually send that information back up to the brainstem, where it's amplified.
Hmm.
So it goes from to ugh. And
Yeah.
then maybe that night we're laying in bed and all of a sudden uh, we become aware of a twisting in our guts. And then there's an image from earlier that day, that accident. Now,
Hmm.
again, I'm not saying that that's going to be traumatizing, but it shows how this can progress. So again, if somebody has this going on, for many years, then it can give rise to chronic gastrointestinal symptoms like a gastric effects, and also to irritable bowel and those kind of things. And when I first started working with people, again, there wasn't that definition of trauma as PTSD,
Right.
as intrusive imagery and so forth. But this is really something that happens in the body. And in order to heal from the
Hmm.
trauma, in a way, it has to unhappen in the body. Again, here I can give you another example.
Yeah,
Let's
please.
just say as a child that somebody has been hit by a parent, a guardian, or a older sibling. And if that happens, once or twice, it's not a big deal. It doesn't really affect us going on in our lives. But if it becomes habitual, becomes chronic, we start to brace against being hit.
Right.
That's obviously something the body does to
Yeah.
protect itself. So many people portray the trauma as chronic pain. So if you can imagine, if your shoulder is held in this position for a long time, we develop chronic pain. Pain, very common representation of the trauma response. So I might ask an individual, a client, if they feel the pain, can they get in contact with the tension that might be underneath the pain?
Hmm.
And usually after a little help, people can do that fairly readily. And then I might say, as you feel that tension, can you explore what might happen if that tension actually increased even more? And the person might say, oh, my shoulders go up like that. Again, that's that defensive response, that protective response.
Yeah.
So I say, okay, that's important. But here we're going to do it very slowly, like 1/50th the time, and just a small amount, and then releasing it, letting it go, and then become aware of sensations, feelings, thoughts. So if anybody wants to join us, please don't feel, compelled to do it. You're welcome to do it, and just to see what comes up for you.
Yeah.
So each time we do this, we then focus on our here and now body
Mhm.
sensations and just track them. So tingling, vibration, changes in heat, coldness, all of the
Yeah.
different things that are going on in the body. And each time we work and complete that which wasn't able to complete at the time, because we couldn't really complete this, because if we would let go, we could be struck again. And so we keep this as a chronic protective mechanism. But it one that needs to be completed. And so in somatic experiencing, we work very much with the completion of that which occurred a long time ago, but has been waiting to finally complete and resolve, and in many cases to transform.
When you're talking about how 80% of the information that's coming to us through the vagus is sensory, a lot of people who experience trauma talk about feeling kind of disembodied,
Yes.
floaty or just
Yeah.
unaware of their own body. Is that just the overwhelm of all of the information that's coming at them? And is the healing part going back into your body the way you were describing and kind of taking it step
Yes.
by
Yeah,
step?
yeah. Yeah, yeah. Actually, that's it's called association. And I'll give you a personal example. I mean, I've worked, again for decades
Yeah.
with people who dissociate as a regular defense mechanism. Again, should never be thought of it in a negative way, in a pejorative way. It is a defense mechanism from being
Hmm?
completely overwhelmed. So I describe in one of my books, In an Unspoken Voice, how the body releases trauma and restores goodness.
Mm.
So I'm crossing the street near where I spent time in California, Encinitas. I'm on the walkway, and the teenager drives her car, and she doesn't see because another car is parked at the
Okay.
stop sign, and she goes through the stop sign and then hits me in the crosswalk. I'm thrown into the windshield and then thrown up into the air out onto the ground.
Mm.
And as the people start coming around and looking down at me like cadaverous ravens, really, it's like I dislocate from my body. And I literally experience myself as being above me and looking down at all of this.
Wow.
And again, I've worked, as I said, with hundreds, thousands of people with dissociation,
Mhm.
but to actually experience it in this raw form, really kind of a learning experience. And at that time, thankfully, again, since I've developed this work, I know what I could do, should do, and can do, but I couldn't do it except that young woman came and announced herself as a physician, actually a pediatrician,
Mhm.
and wanted to know if there's anything she could do to help. And I said, please stay here with me. So she comes and sits down on the ground
Wow.
and she takes my hand in her hand. And in that moment, I come back from being out of my body into my body and can, with gentle shaking and trembling, release and discharge that stored energy from the being hit,
Yeah.
by the car. So again, it's like, even though I've developed this method, it's something that I still need somebody to be there, because it's not just what happened to us, but it's really rather what we hold inside in the absence of that present, connected, empathetic others.
Right.
I'll give you another example. This is one that I talk about in my autobiography.
Mhm.
So again, I've developed this method, and I'm starting to get these strange physical sensations. And then just momentary flashes that I can't really make out what the flashes are about. And so in ancient Greek, there was an archetype called Chiron. And the way I understand Chiron today, it's about the wounded healer.
Hmm.
And all of us who work in the healing
Yeah.
arts, the healing professions, we're motivated to a large degree, I think, from our own
Mhm.
experiences of trauma over our life to span. And I realized it was time for me to take a dose of my own medicine. So I asked one of my students to sit with me, to be my guide. And in somatic experiencing, we don't go right into a trauma. That can actually be re-traumatizing.
Okay.
So we're looking at counter forces, counter experiences. So when she started to guide me, I came to a memory when I was 4 years old, and it was my birthday, and my parents came into my bedroom late at night or early in the morning, and underneath the bed they lay a railroad track, model railroad track, down into the room and then back underneath the bed. I woke up, the trains were going around,
Hmm.
and I literally jumped out of bed, ran over to the transformer so I could control the speed and toot the horn. And though I didn't have the words for it, even though many horrible things did happen to me, but very clearly, very traumatic things did happen to me in my life, in that moment, I knew that I was cared about, cared for,
Yeah.
and thus to be loved. And so we worked on that as a bodily experience of being loved, of being
Yeah.
cared for. And then that then took us to the opposite experience. Because for many years, our family was experiencing life threat from the mafia. Guy who was he was like the Al Capone, Johnny DiAguardo, Johnny Dio. And he was probably the most ruthless of all of the mafia. And he's featured in the movie The Goodfellas and The Irishman. He's mentioned in both of those. If you really wanted to put terror into another gang, he's the person that you would hire to do that. And he basically, it's a long story. It
Hmm.
was not my father's fault, but he was called to testify against Johnny Dio. And Johnny Dio basically told him that if he testifies, he'll find his family face down in the East River. This was serious. So in order to, I think, to really convey to my family the ruthlessness of this, I was brutally assaulted and raped.
Oh,
And I think that they wanted me to tell my parents about that,
yeah.
so if I would come back crying and so forth. But I hid it from them and I hid it from myself. And it was only with my student, with my guide,
Hmm.
many, many, many years later, of course,
Yeah.
that I was able to actually remember this piece by piece, but also to shift back and forth between that bodily experience
Yeah.
and the body experience from being 4 years old of cared for and being loved. So again, I was able to really put that in the past
Hmm.
where it belonged, take it
Yeah.
from where it was in the present
Yeah. Still living in you.
and still living in me. And again, this is something that, even though, again, in both of these examples, that
Mhm.
I know, of course, how to work with people around that, it's not something that I could do without some guidance, some support.
Right. Yes.
And so,
Yeah.
again, the autobiography of trauma, the healing journey, my healing journey, is to really look at what it takes to heal and to tell our own stories.
Yeah.
And I truly believe, it's not even a belief, I know that anybody and everybody also has their own story to tell.
Right.
And I really encourage people, because when I started with this book, I had no idea that I would publish it as a book. It
Hmm.
was simply because I'm the age I am now, that in the years that I have in the future to live,
Hmm.
compared to the years that I had from the moment of conception to where I am right now, I it was time for me again just to write my story to myself. And so I started to do that. And this very close friend of mine, asked me what I was doing, and I told her, and she
Hmm.
said, "Can I look at this?" And I said, "Yeah, but this is very private. So to keep it private." I looked at it and she said, "Peter, you really need to write this as a book." And I said, "There's no way I would do that. It's too raw. It's too vulnerable for a
Yeah.
person in the public eye to reveal those parts of myself." it seemed like just too much. And she said, well, I hope you think about it. And I was just talking to somebody else before. A lot of times in my life when I don't know what my next step is or when something is starting to emerge in
Hmm.
me, my dreams are important allies
Hmm.
in regard. And so during this time of ambivalence or indecision, whatever, I had the following dream. And I'm standing in front of a field, and a large field. And in my hands, I have reams of paper, and they're typewritten, so it's some kind of a manuscript.
Yeah.
And so I looked to my left, looked right, left, and right. And then in this, again, ambivalence, this strong breeze comes from behind me. This wind comes from behind me and
Hmm.
takes all these pages and lifts them
Hmm.
into the air, out into the meadow, into the field to land where they might land.
Wow.
Yeah. So when I awoke, I realized that my conscious mind couldn't make the decision, but
Hmm.
my unconscious mind had already made the decision that I would write it as a book to land where it might land and to help people in their own healing and in storing and in telling their own stories. Because again, we all have important stories to tell, even if it's just to ourselves.
Right.
I deeply encourage people to take on this task.
Well, doctor, thank you for your vulnerability and your courage and putting your voice out there. I will tell you, you were actually part of the impetus for me and just like Nana, writing stories about my great grandmas. So all the
Ah,
way 10 generations back. So my middle name is Elizabeth. I'm writing a story for every Elizabeth grandma I have, which is 45 of them.
whoa.
Yeah, and part of it is so that their story gets told, and I'm
Yeah.
doing a little bit of research, a
Beautiful.
little bit of
Oh,
intuition.
wow. Oh,
Well,
that's
you
great.
inspired that, so thank you,
Oh,
doctor.
okay. Well, then I've at least the book has reached one person.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but
Absolutely.
exactly. Again, it's and I can see it in your face and the joy
Mhm.
in doing this and the reconnection. And again, you're the first person who's asked me about one of my grandmothers,
Mhm.
and I hadn't thought about that apple pie for centuries.
Oh, well, doctor, I could talk to you all day, but you have other things to do, I know. I would like you to let our listeners know, what are your suggestions for first steps? I mean, there is a lot of support that's needed through
Uh,
this process. What
yeah,
do you
yeah,
recommend? And all of your information will be linked in the show notes, so everyone will be able to
sure,
access all of
sure.
that. But just in your words, what do you recommend
Yeah,
for first steps?
yeah. Well, I mean, first to be aware of behaviors that seem repetitive or relationships that seem repetitive. So we have relationship A, and then it blows up, and then we go to relationship B, and then after a while we'll realize, oh my gosh, relationship B is almost the same as relationship A.
Hmm.
So behavior, physical symptoms, all of these things, like my physical symptoms in the autobiography, those what drew me to get some assistance. And I actually just discovered this because the person who's the new co-director of my nonprofit institute, he said that now somatic experiencing, the work that I developed, is taught now in 55 countries. I didn't know there were that many countries,
Wow. Yeah.
to 200,000 practitioners. So it's available really many places throughout the world.
Hmm.
And to get more information, you can go to our website, which is somatic experiencing, one word, somaticexperiencing.com. And it also lists a lot of my lectures and, things like that. But it also connects with the nonprofit, which is responsible, entrusted to bringing this work into the world. And
Mhm.
that's traumahealing.org. And you can link from that, both from the somaticexperiencing.com website, and it also lists books and and other resources. But
Great.
if you're having these kind of symptoms, I think that we can't give ourselves a greater gift than to find somebody, as I did, to just sit with me, to be with me, to guide me. And because once we've been guided in that way, then we often can just continue the work on our own.
Mhm.
But to get started, we really need that other. There's a Motown song that goes something like, it takes one to stand in the dark alone. It takes two to let the light shine through.
Yeah.
So I think, again, it's a gift that
Mhm.
we can give to each other. And it's a gift that we deserve. We all deserve to be supported in that way. And again, I really encourage people, as you did, to write their stories. Again, yours, it's beautiful the way you looked at the whole grandmother lineage.
Thank
And
you.
I look forward to reading that as a book,
Thank you, doctor.
if you decide.
That's the goal. So thank you. I am just so appreciative of your time and so honored to have spoken with you. Thank you so much for sharing your
Oh, you're
time with
welcome.
all of us.
Okay. All right. Take good care.
All
Okay.
right. Thank you,
All right.
doctor.
Bye. Bye, Amy.
So excited you were here today. Thank you so much for listening. I would love to hear your story. If you're interested in sharing it, please go to justlikenana.com to submit your story. There are also resources there if you're interested in learning more about discovering your ancestry or breaking some trauma cycles in your family. I have an ask of you. If you enjoyed today's show, I would love if you subscribed and let a friend know they might enjoy it as well. Talk to you again next week. Can't wait. Just Like Nana's theme song was written and performed by Carter Penny.